I'd like to start by saying a right to an abortion should not translate to a right to a dead child, no matter what. If a child survives an abortion, he or she should be treated with the same respect and medical concern and attention as any other child born prematurely at the same stage of development. This is really about infanticide, plain and simple. I would remind you that abortion is not health care, and neither is infanticide. So any argument that this bill would prop itself up between a doctor and a patient is false. This is about a newborn human person left to die without medical rights. I just wanted to mention some of the statistics about how many of these babies are born. There's limited data on the incidence of children surviving abortions, but in the words of Dr. Willard Cates, former head of the CDC's abortion surveillance group, live births are little known because organized medicine, from fear of public clamor and legal action, treats them as more of an embarrassment to be hushed than a problem to be solved. However, data from the CDC about the incidence of infants surviving abortions gives us an idea of the depth of the issue. According to the CDC, between the years 2003 and 2014, there were somewhere between 376 and 588 infant deaths across the medical code, P96.4, which keeps tracks of babies born alive. These are only statistics from hospitals because abortion clinics are not required to report. I would just ask you to read the testimony of Kelly, the abortion survivor that we actually found in the interim between this bill and last time. She's a North Carolina abortion survivor.
Thank you, Ms. Fitzgerald. Next up, Mr. John Rustin, and then we'll have Liz Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm John Rustin, president of the North Carolina Family Policy Council. It really is unconscionable to think that in America and in North Carolina today that we need legislation to clarify that an infant human being who is born alive after a failed abortion is worthy of life. But this is the truth of what we're facing now. This bill is very simple and very clear. It would require any healthcare practitioner present at the time a child is born alive to exercise the same degree of professional skill, care, and diligence to preserve the life and health of the child as a reasonably diligent and conscientious healthcare provider would render to any other child born alive at the same gestational age. And it would also require that the child born alive is immediately transported to and admitted to a hospital where there are healthcare providers who actually do care about the life and the care of that child. Senate Bill 405 will prevent medical negligence, it will prevent infanticide, and it will protect innocent human life in North Carolina. We thank Senator Kravick and others for bringing this bill forward, and we urge you to support this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rustin. Ms. Barber, and after Ms. Barber, Ms. Birdsong.
Good morning. I'm Liz Barber, policy analyst with the American Civil Liberties Union of North Carolina. I'm here today on behalf of our over 25,000 members and supporters. Let's be clear, this bill is not necessary. Infanticide is criminal in North Carolina. Doctors already have an obligation to provide appropriate medical care in all cases. To suggest otherwise is offensive to healthcare providers across the state. This bill is a solution in search of a problem that simply does not exist. So what are we doing here? What are we talking about today? Senate Bill 405 comes out of a national playbook of anti-abortion laws designed to stigmatize abortion, stigmatize the women who seek abortion, and outright demonize the doctors who provide them. I urge you to see this bill for what it is, yet another attempt by anti-abortion politicians using inflammatory, deceptive, and insulting language about abortion care just to score political points. I urge you to see this for what it is and vote no. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Birdsong next, and then Mr. Pincus.
Good morning. My name is Susanna Birdsong, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs at Planned Parenthood South Atlantic. Senate Bill 405 targets healthcare providers who provide safe and legal abortion care with the threat of a criminal penalty. The language of this bill is not based in medical science or fact and implies that medical professionals, or in fact it has been stated that medical professionals are performing infanticide. These claims are blatantly false and are being pushed by anti-abortion activists in order to scare people and stigmatize reproductive health care. Because the bill assesses criminal penalties to providers, the impact would be to intimidate physicians away from providing the care that patients need. It's just another attempt to play politics with people's health care and to drive a false narrative to stigmatize reproductive health care. Physicians in North Carolina already follow rigorous licensing requirements, standards of care, and ethical codes when providing care to pregnant patients. This bill is really an attack on North Carolinians' access to safe abortions and attacks the physicians who provide them, particularly those who provide care to patients experiencing complex pregnancies. I want to remind you all that in 2019, Governor Cooper vetoed and the legislature sustained an identical bill. In his veto statement, he wrote, "Laws already protect newborn babies, and this bill is an unnecessary interference between doctors and their patients. This needless legislation would criminalize doctors and other healthcare providers for a practice that simply does not exist." That still holds true today. Thank you for your time, and I urge you to vote no.
Thank you. Mr. Pincus?
Good morning. I'm Dr. Bill Pincus, an ENT surgeon and president of North Carolina Right to Life. We would encourage the committee to pass Senate Bill 405, the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act, as a stand against infanticide and protection of newborns. With increasing and wanton disregard for the sanctity of human life and the dignity of each human person, it is imperative that we stand for life. What is horrifying is that if a child actually survives abortion, the brutal attack on her body, pro-abortion advocates don't want to even provide the kind of medical care that would be afforded to any other child born at that gestational age. What are we afraid of? What are we trying to hide? We are not barbarians. In a recent poll, the Marius poll in January 2021, respondents who call themselves pro-choice tend to want significant legal protections for the unborn child. And 20% of the Democrats who were surveyed and described themselves as pro-life, despite the fact that the Democratic Party has become increasingly favorable in permissive abortion laws. I want to add one quick statement about the babies in Canada, where the Canadian Information Health Society reports that 768 live-term births over a period from
I'm sorry, Mr. Pincus, we're out of time. Sorry about that. We're a little tight with crossover. Next up, we have Mr. Mark Creech, Reverend Creech.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Reverend Mark Creech, Executive Director of the Christian Action League. The faith to which the Christian Action League supporters adhere holds that all human life is sacred because it's made in the image of God. It derives its worth from God and not cultural standards. And in our nation, we call this an inalienable right. But even if one is not religious, the issue of children born alive is a human life issue, a civil rights issue and one doesn't need to be a Christian or member of any faith to believe that children extracted from the mother's body, living, breathing, and moving, are human beings and are entitled to all of the protections of the law, which includes the right to live. A former member of this body and now serving in Congress, Congressman Dan Bishop, has said concerning born alive legislation in the past, and he explains one of the reasons why North Carolina needs such a law. He says current law doesn't address this because no one's ever contemplated the need to address it before, because it seemed under our shared values obvious to all that if someone were alive, there'd be no thought of denying medical care to save their life. It's a revelation to some of us that some would contemplate that a live human being can be so vulnerable and so little thought of that it might even be remotely conceivable to allow that human being to die by neglect or by an overt act against it while it is allowed alive and outside of its mother's body. For these reasons, the Christian Action League urges your support.
Thank you, Reverend Creech. In looking back over the list, I can't make out this handwriting, but I'm going to try. Is there a Julie Emmons or Evans present? Hi, Julie. Sorry if I butchered that.
Yes, sir. No problem. Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Emmons. I'm here with the NC Values Coalition, and it is my honor to read the testimony of Melissa Oden, the director of the Abortion Survivors Network. I am an abortion survivor. In August of 1977, my birth mother, as a 19-year-old college student, had a saline infusion abortion forced upon her against her will by my grandmother. The intent of a saline abortion is to poison the baby to death in a toxic solution. I soaked in this solution for 5 days, after which my mother's labor was finally induced, and I was born alive. A nurse rushed me into the NICU, not following my grandmother's orders to let me die. I've now been in contact with a nurse who was working that day in the NICU who rushed me in. I'm one of the lucky ones to not only survive an abortion, but to have someone fight to save me. Not everyone is that lucky. The fact that I was ultimately provided medical care doesn't negate the fact that there was initially an argument about whether that should or would happen. And it surely doesn't negate the fact that other children have faced a far different fate than I. Passage of Senate Bill 405 will ensure that the fate of survivors like me or the 384 survivors who are part of our national network aren't left in the hands of their abortionists. Thank you for giving Senate Bill 405 every consideration.
Thank you. Any other members of the audience wish to speak? Any members in the committee room have any questions or comments? Senator Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the question to the bill sponsor and then a comment. Senator Krovic, a comment was made that this is the identical bill to what the governor vetoed last time. It's my understanding this is not the identical bill. Can you explain the differences between this bill and the last bill?
Senator Krovic, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Johnson. Yes, there were some concerns about the punishments. And in the prior bill, it was a felony conviction if that infant was not cared for. This one has been reduced to a misdemeanor.
Senator Johnson, you're recognized for a follow-up.
And thank you, Senator Krovic and Mr. Chair. A couple of comments that I'd like to respond to. We've been told multiple times, even through the discussion last time, that this doesn't occur. This is some solution looking for a problem. But it's baffling to me how quickly we forget the well-publicized trials of Kermit Gosnell and all the horrific things that he did. And then in addition to that, we've heard that we already have laws in place. Well, that makes me pause and wonder, if we've already got laws in place, what's the damage that this bill is doing to begin with? If it's already there, who are we harming? And then last but not least, we often hear that this has to do with a woman's rights. And so my question is, at what age does a woman, or any human for that mean, actually have rights? Because apparently those rights only kick in at a certain age. They don't kick in at conception or even at birth in this case. So I think a lot of the arguments are gaslighting, and I fully support this bill, and Mr. Chair, at the appropriate time, I move for a favorable.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. I'll hold that. Senator Mohammed, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a comment, Mr. Chair, and then a question for staff.
You're recognized for both.
So what I'm trying to understand, I feel like I'm hearing mixed messages here, because I think I heard the bill sponsor say that because of our 20-week ban, this doesn't really occur in North Carolina, and here's some folks that say we already have laws on the books, and then some folks saying that we don't. So what I'm trying to understand from staff is, hopefully somebody can help me, is it's my understanding that, first of all, obviously I think it's critical if, God forbid, a baby was actually born during an abortion, an infant, obviously I would think a medical professional would provide some sort of care. It's the humane thing to do. And it's my understanding, if a doctor didn't do that, that would be a Class F felony. Is that what it is?
Mr. Bates. Mr. Bates, you're recognized to answer this question if you're prepared.
Jason Moran Bates, Legislative Analysis. Under GS 1418, that's the manslaughter statute, it is involuntary manslaughter if a culpably negligent or omission kills another human being, and that would be a Class F felony.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Bates. Senator Mohammed, you're recognized for
so
follow-up.
follow-up. So, Mr. Moran Bates, so again, just want to understand, so if a doctor was being negligent and didn't provide that care, just want to clarify, I want to get it correct. You're telling me that they would be charged with a Class F felony?
Mr. Bates, you're recognized.
Senator, the decision whether to charge someone would, of course, be up to the district attorney. I can just tell you that under GS 1418, involuntary manslaughter is punishable as a Class F felony, and the common law has defined that to be a culpably negligent act or omission that kills another human being.
Thank you, Mr. Bates. Senator Mohammed,
One more
you're
follow-up,
recognized.
Mr. Chair, again for staff. Mr. Moran Bates, can you share with us, are there any existing federal or state laws or restrictions that would prevent something that Senator Krawick's talking about that would happen, besides the felony that you said that a doctor or a medical professional could be charged with if they were negligent in providing care?
You're recognized to respond.
I am not aware of any federal laws that would apply here. I believe the only state law that would apply in this circumstance would be GS 1418, but I cannot say that for certain.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Senator Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a follow-up to Senator Mohammed. I'm curious if the sponsors or maybe staff have any data on times when maybe there has been negligence in providing care to an infant and the DA has not been able to prosecute.
Would you like that? Or do you want?
I would refer to staff.
Okay. Mr. Bates, you're recognized.
Jason Moran Bates, Legislative Analysis. I do not have any information on that. I'm sorry.
Any other questions or comments in the
Mr.
committee?
Chairman, I would like to make note, as I said in my comments, the doctor is performing an abortion. If that baby is born alive, and I believe someone in the audience made note to that too, he's not likely to report it. He's not likely to say, I botched this abortion. So, and as Senator Johnson said, if this is already law, and we have, and you will hear from these in our next committee meeting, I'm sure, we'll have time to get some of these people in here. We have met these abortion survivors. We have spoken with people who have been there and witnessed these babies being left alone. So we know that it is happening from testimony from other people. So if it's already being done, then let's err on the side of caution and pass this bill to make certain that everybody understands. I just think that's crucial. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Krawick. Senator Britt, you're recognized.
And this question may be for staff, but would a doctor currently have a duty to provide care for that child that he's in the process of killing through that abortion?
Mr. Moran Bates.
Jason Moran Bates, Legislative Analysis. Currently, there are no laws requiring an affirmative duty of care to preserve the life of infants who survive abortion attempts.
And then
Senator Britt, you're recognized.
If there's no affirmative duty, could he be found to be neglectful of a duty?
Mr. Bates?
Jason Moran Bates, legislative analysis. I believe that would end up being a question for a jury in some sort of trial.
Senator Brett?
Do you have a legal opinion on what that decision would be?
Mr. Bates?
Jason Moran Bates, legislative analysis. Without knowing the full facts of the case and all of the circumstances, I don't feel I am qualified to make that judgment.
Senator Britt, you're recognized one more time.
Under the general definition of what is negligence and what an omission to be deemed negligent would be, does one not have to owe a duty first?
Mr. Moran Bates?
If we are talking about a civil trial, the general elements of negligence are a duty owed, that duty being breached, proximate cause and damages. The criminal standard would be a little bit different. I have not litigated anything in upwards of 6 years. I can't tell you exactly how something would turn out. I apologize.
Terrible. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Moran Bates. Senator Barnes, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank Senator Crawford for her work on this bill. And even though it has been vetoed in the past, as one of the bill sponsors, I will always continue to fight for the life of innocent babies, and we will keep on doing that.
Thank you, Senator Barnes. Senator Heiss, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think this will go back probably to staff, if that's where you choose to refer it, in regards to interpretation of the law. As I heard you read that felony, and I think somebody said it was Class F, not a lawyer, so I don't play one, that if the death were a result of failure to provide an action by the doctor, then they could be charged in this. But, I mean, if that's the determining factor, if the death were a result of a child being born at 20 weeks of age in gestation, if the death were a result of damage done to the fetus during the abortion procedure and others, there is nothing in that that says when that child is born that it is illegal to not provide care. It is only when the case that, as I'm hearing that statute, it is only when the case when that baby dies and the reasoning for that death happens to be that the medical professional did not provide care, not all the other potential medical reasons it could be. This bill would change that. I'm thinking this bill would change that environment to where when that child is born alive, the medical professionals have to provide care for that child, and this low-level misdemeanor would be solely based on the fact of whether or not they provided appropriate care. Is my understanding accurate on that?
Mr. Moran Bates, you're recognized.
Jason Moran Bates, legislative analysis. Yes, Senator Heiss, I believe that is the case if I'm understanding your question correctly. The bill does impose an affirmative duty to provide the standard of care, and it does create a penalty for individuals who fail to provide that care.
Thank you. Senator Mohammed, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question from one of the members of the audience that's here. I believe we had heard someone from the North Carolina Medical Society that was here on the pharmacy bill. Are they still here?
I'm not sure they are available to comment on this subject.
Okay. Well, then a comment real quick, Mr. Chair. As a lawyer, I know through the North Carolina State Bar, our licensing body, lawyers have some sort of ethical obligations and duties. I'm not a medical doctor. I don't play one on TV or anything either. But I would think that medical doctors have some sort of ethical duties and obligations in order to be licensed to act when, if an infant would happen to be born during one of these procedures. I don't know if staff can maybe answer that about a medical doctor's ethical obligations and duties?
I think we're getting circular here, but we'll try one more time. Mr. Moran Bates.
Jason Moran Bates, legislative analysis. I am also a lawyer, not a doctor, and I do not know what the ethical standards for doctors would be. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Moran Bates.
Thank you, Senator Mohammed. Senator Crawford, you're recognized.
With regard to a doctor who, in the event that an abortion does result in a live birth, if the doctor does provide care, and this is a question maybe for the bill sponsors or for staff, thank you in advance, Jason. If the doctor does provide care and the infant unfortunately does not survive, what is the burden of proof for that doctor in ensuring that they're not punished if they are convicted of a felony?
Mr. Murphy, would you like that one?
I
Senator
will,
Crawford,
I will
you're
attempt to
recognized.
answer it, and then Jason can help me. The bill just says that the doctor will perform the duties that services that he would offer to any other infant born at that gestational age. So exactly what they would do for any preemie that was born, that's what they would do. Usually call the hospital and give them immediate care, whatever that would be. That's what the bill says. And Jason, if you want to add something to it.
Mr. Moran Bates.
Jason Moran Bates, Legislative Analysis. I believe the general burden of proof for any sort of criminal penalty would apply. It would have to be shown beyond reasonable doubt that the physician had not exercised the same degree of care.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the committee members present in committee room? Any online? Seeing none, I have a motion from Senator Heiss. The motion is for a favorable report for the bill with a referral to rules. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Senate Bill 405.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you,
And
members.
with that, this committee is adjourned.